Hello.
Hi guys, welcome back to Seriously with S. I am a graduate at Texas Women's University, and today I am with Carissa Garza, a lecturer at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley.
Again, my name is Carissa Garza. I'm also a PhD student with Texas Women's University, and basically I work with our first year writing program at UTRGV. I have been in this for a few years, and I focus mostly on our Rhetoric and Composition 1 and Rhetoric and Composition 2 students, but I also spend a lot of time with our transitioning students who are not quite TSI ready, so I do have a reading and writing studio class that I also teach, as well as what we call Jumpstart, which is kind of like a bridge class between high school seniors going into their freshman year of college.
Okay, that's amazing. Sounds like you have a lot on your plate.
It's definitely hectic. Every semester there's always something new and a whole bunch of exciting things to do, so there's never a dull moment.
No, for sure. So I see that you are in touch with first year composition students. So what is something that you're interested in regards to teaching first year composition students?
So working with these first year college students, something that our program is really, big about, or something that we kind of promote, are these initial ideas of threshold concepts. And that's something that's come around from, I think, Linda Adler-Kastner and Elizabeth Wardle wrote about this extensively. But it's basically trying to get students to think beyond these core ideas of certain subjects. So when it comes to like writing and reading, they have these preconceived notions of how that's supposed to play out. Having been through the K-12 system, they're kind of used to a very specific type of English class. So with threshold concepts, you try to take them out of those preconceived notions and kind of get them to think about writing, reading, learning in different ways. And I try to implement more of that into my classes and like my pedagogical approach to things. So many students lack that confidence and they feel like they're not capable of writing. It's really neat to kind of take them from that place and show them that the learning is happening all the time.
I'm so happy to hear that you're taking priority in building their self-confidence as writers.
Yeah, it makes things really interesting, especially because at the university where I teach, it's a Hispanic serving institution. So most of our students, not all of them, but many, come in having gone through the K-12 system labeled as English language learners. And so that has also tied into the struggles that they've had to overcome and get to where they're at this college level. So it's really cool to build up that confidence and help them to see learning and education in a new way, and especially reading and writing, which many students come in hating these subjects. So
Carissa, and that is exactly why I wanted to do this podcast with you, because collaborating would mean so much as Hispanic women in entering into a field that is predominantly white. So thank you once again for being here. We're breaking barriers in a sense, and I think that leads us to our next question, which is, how do you define, in a sense, learning? And that's what you were talking about, creating a new definition and showing students a new way of thinking, processing, writing, and reading.
That's one of the first things that comes up with our students, is we try to implement this idea that learning is something that's happening all the time. It's not just this academic experience where you have to sit at a desk and memorize things and fill out graphic organizers and give the correct answers. Like, learning is so much more than that, and it also happens in a lot of different places. And then we segue from there into writing, reading. Like, all of this has to tie into communicating and how you are sharing messages, and that can also be conveyed in a lot of different ways. And so it's just really cool to think about this, like literacy learning. It's not just that preconceived idea that it's this academic process that has to happen in a classroom. It's literally acquiring that new understanding, new knowledge in all the different spaces with all sorts of different people, and it's really cool to see that realization when they start to understand that.
And that is what Donald Murray talks about in writing as a process. We see that it's about breaking it down and being able to guide students into different levels of learning. And I think that it starts from a class warm-up to a project at the end of the semester that includes various aspects of composition and reading.
I love that you brought up Murray, because writing as a process was something that really played in heavily to my pedagogy, at least when I started. When I started, I was very green. I didn't really understand how I was supposed to approach these college courses. I came from teaching high school students, so it was very different. The Marie reading touches on that really nicely about this writing process, like being able to take it through all these different steps and engage with like your message and how you're telling a story and your voice. And at least in my classes, I try to incorporate that and also like promote this multimodal aspect of it too, where these messages and the things you're trying to convey don't have to always be strictly written in these really formulaic, really academic ways. It can manifest in a lot of different things, whether it be like visuals or some kind of, podcast or something that they create that's sharing a message. So I think that's really cool that you brought that up.
Yeah, and that is what Jody Shipka talks about in Toward a Composition Made Whole. In her book, she analyzes and explores this new theory of allowing students to play with various aspects of technology, arts, and craft to communicate their message and their beliefs.
Shika mentions all these different ways to communicate and also bringing in that topic of like technology, which I feel is super important, obviously, because it's embedded in everything that we do now. So being able to get students to understand processes in maybe like digital spaces or in more artistic or visual spaces helps them not only get through these types of classes, but also understand how they're communicating and being rhetorical every day.
I mean, technology is so advanced nowadays that I think it's very important to teach students how to use those devices in a way that is contributing to advancing and making new discoveries.
Yes, absolutely. Making meaning. I think that's really awesome. I've actually come to understand, like from personal experience with students, we have this, I guess, misconception that a lot of these newer generations, since they're being born into this technological age, they know how to do all these technical things. And that's a huge misconception. And I've learned this from my own students because so much is just done on the phone or through apps. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of other technological outlets or digital outlets that they've never even used before or never even thought of incorporating into anything. And so it's really cool to give them those opportunities, especially in our classes, to utilize new and developing technologies and build that up so they can communicate and be rhetorical and share a message in a lot of these different spaces, ones that they might not have used on their own.
I'm scared that this new generation is not going to be able to use Word or Excel or even PowerPoint. And even Google Docs. I mean, it's complicated. And for our third question, how has your research impacted your teaching?
So I think with the research regarding rational concepts and multimodality, it's basically influenced most of everything that I do. Most of the assignments for the different projects that we work on, I try to incorporate some sense of multimodality in there. I also try to encourage my students to embrace either their voice or other aspects of communication that we've discussed. Thinking about multilingualism, I think I already mentioned that I'm at a Hispanic serving institution, so a lot of my students, they are multilingual. So encouraging them to kind of embrace that and utilize it in different ways in the classroom, whether it be through just group discussion or actually incorporating other languages into their writing. And then at the end of the semester, I have my students work through a portfolio where they submit projects from the semester. And several of those projects are multimodal. The portfolio itself is multimodal. They do have to create a digital website. Through that process, they're working on those digital literacies as well, which we just kind of touched on, helping them to learn how to navigate these different spaces and the different programs and outlets, and then conveying messages in ways that go beyond just academic text and using visuals and videos, and some even do audio recordings, sculptures, paintings. I've gotten all sorts of different things. And so it's heavily influenced by the things that I've read and worked on and researched with, again, those ideas of threshold concepts and multimodality. I am hoping, I can expand on this a little bit later, but I'm hoping to go beyond that to incorporate some other forms of maybe things like digital activism or digital rhetoric, but I still need to kind of assess where I'm going with that.
That sounds like a fun project, and it sounds like students are engaged. This is exactly what Shipka is talking about in allowing students to use what interests them to create a final project. And I like that you also talked about being multilingual. I've also incorporated it into my teaching philosophy, being multiculturally aware and being able to incorporate multimodalities in my classroom. is very important to me. So those are two major points in my teaching philosophy. A scholar that researched this semester, Minzan Liu, in Professing Multiculturalism, the Politics of Style in the Contact Zone. In this article, she talks about being aware of the different contact zones that are in our classroom. So open and create those spaces where students feel welcomed and relaxed, and like you said, being able to express their voice and even find their voice. So this helps them learn more about who they are and learn more about their background.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned adding that to your teaching philosophy and having that be an integral part in how you run a classroom or how you interact with your students. The Lou piece was really helpful when thinking about contact zones, which was something I hadn't even really thought about. And when we did those readings, I felt like, oh, these are things that I feel I'm already aware of, but I had never intentionally really sat down to explore them. And the Lou piece really helped me to think more about my students, and beyond just the multilingual aspects of it, but just in general, they are all different. They're all experiencing different things. They are coming from different places, different backgrounds and experiences. And so having a classroom that really encourages and embraces who they are and helps develop them further as learners in the classroom, and also to be successful in the future in whatever way that might look. I felt like that was really, really cool to explore that. So I love hearing that you're thinking deeply about that and adding it into your teaching philosophy and how you would like to have your class function.
Of course. And something that I was thinking about as we wrap up the semester, if a teacher is multiculturally aware, she can understand their errors better. Grammar was such a big topic, but as teachers, it is important for us to know the importance of grammar, because if we can identify the mistakes that the students are making on their paper, we can identify their thought process. And then once we can figure that out, we can help them better. So that has been impacting my work recently.
I'm glad that this came up because I just liked the conversation revolving around grammar.
Yeah.
Because I always felt like, yes, okay, your commas can be in the right place, but at the end of the day, just because your I's were dotted and your T's were crossed doesn't mean that your ideas were developed and expressed in a way that was actually intelligible or anything like that. And so for the longest time, I was really, I don't want to say anti-grammar, but I always hated the idea that we needed to really focus on grammar. And I always wanted my students to move beyond. When we would do peer feedback, they're marking, hey, you spelled this wrong. And I'm like, don't focus on the spelling. But I appreciated the conversations that we were having, because it took me from a place of being really anti-grammar to, at the end of the day, I am still also working with students who had to learn English, and grammar was the thing that helped kind of anchor them in understanding the language and how to communicate. Not saying that I have to go in with a red marker and
bleed all over their papers.
Yes, exactly. It was okay, this is a light here.
Oh, definitely. And then we can take a look at how grammar impacts English language learners and English native speakers. Okay, so what do we expect to change in the future?
I think right now, when I think about rhetoric and composition, writing classes, English classes, the biggest thing that's coming up when we talk about change is AI. Sometimes it always comes back to this conversation, but that's what's happening.
I didn't want to bring ChatGPT, but it comes up, it has to come up, especially when we're talking about students not knowing how to navigate the tools that we have online. And so it's interesting how they're going to be able to know how to use certain tools that we did not grow up using.
And I have a colleague who is actually really trying to implement AI into their class. The reality is it's a tool. And I'm going to go back to my English language learners. A lot of them are using it for translation purposes. I think it can be used in really cool ways to help generate ideas or organize things, outline things. But when does it get to a point, where's that line where it's okay, but now maybe we're having it do too much, or maybe we're not developing the skills or challenging our students because they're kind of honing in on these tools and just depending on them.
I think that my favorite example that they used in class was comparing it to when calculators first came out. I would get told, no, you cannot use a calculator because you should be able to do math in your head. Now that we see this happening again with AI, we're going to see how it goes, I think. Everybody has different feelings about it. People are afraid of it.
I love that you brought up the calculator example because, one, I'm horrible at math. This is why I teach English.
Right.
So the calculator was my lifeline there. And when I think about the calculator, I'm like, helps with calculations and things like that. But with writing, like, it's communication. We're always communicating. How often are we trying to find the square root of an object? But I'm like, the students need to be able to communicate without depending on ChatGPT. And it kind of breaks my heart when I get like emails and I can tell like just the email itself was generated by AI. And I'm like, guys, like, it's just an email. I use a lot of real world examples like, hey, I have a lot of students that are going into nursing. You know, you're not going to be able to pull out your phone and ask ChatGPT or something AI to help you explain to a family member that their so-and-so is in the ER. There are some very real situations where you have to be able to speak with tact and communicate to other people. And if we're not working on those skills, if we're not developing them, you know, you get really rusty.
And even doing oral presentations, they are so afraid of public speaking. I think that considering all the events that have taken place, such as COVID-19, it makes so much sense for students to be a little bit more scared.
So I guess, I mean, with all that in mind, we've gone through several weeks of, you know, different topics, themes, introducing ourselves to new types of research and theories. Is there anything that maybe moving forward you want to explore a little bit more, or something that really piques your interest that you want to, you know, continue running with?
I want to keep exploring the writing process. That is such a big deal in every research that I read. And everybody's trying to figure out if there is a writing process. I've been thinking of maybe creating or coming up with an equation, because if we look at math, I know it's so scary, but if we have to know the formulas before being able to input each number in each place. I want to explore the writing process, and we know that it's not linear. I don't think that it's supposed to be linear. So I think that that's where I'm at right now. I'm still very raw, as you can tell.
Yeah, no, and I agree 100% with what you were saying. And I love that you mentioned coming up with kind of, you know, these formulas. I hadn't really thought much of it, but in the same way that I resonate with, you know, the English language, literature type stuff, rhetoric, all of that, and I cannot for the life of me understand math, there are students who are the opposite, right? And I feel like when you brought that up about kind of, you know, formulas and finding these, you know, ways, all I could think about was like access. Like, that's making it even more accessible to maybe the students who don't function in the same way that maybe I do, right? I'm thinking of like the whole right brain, left brain, you know, side of things. And I think that could be really, really awesome and really helpful for students who maybe do need something that's more of like a plan, part of a process that they can engage with. Like, that's so cool. Please keep me posted.
You're definitely part of it now, because the conversation came out when we were talking. So
I want to be part of that, and I want to see where this goes, because that is such a cool concept. Before this class, I probably would have like shrugged at that. Like, now I'm definitely more open to that.
Again, it goes back to English. It goes back to communicating and being able to present and transmit a message.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that touches back to kind of the writing for transfer ideas, or like writing across curriculum. It is tied into a lot of the different things that students do in the other disciplines. So they're all tied together, 100%.
And I do want to give a shout out to Dr. Gregory Steffens. He is a professor at a university in Puerto Rico. He's been talking about and researching transferable skills for a long time now.
That's so awesome. I'm so excited. Okay, well, now you've really got my wheels turning.
Good. Okay, well, thank you so much, Carissa, for joining me and talking to me. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me, and we can have this little chat.
Well, guys, thank you for listening to Seriously with Us. Mwah.